Now, when you say, when we talk about police departments, we have this thing of, hey, good cops, there's good cops and bad cops, you know? And I kind of don't prescribe to that because I feel like regardless of that, they're part of a system. Regardless, the good cops don't really can influence the culture to change innocent people from being killed in the street. So I look at it as more of a systemic issue that needs to be handled, maybe legislatively, maybe structurally with the training. Where do you see things going as far as to minimize these issues, or is this by design that we're always going to have this happening of our people being killed in the streets?
Can we clip the power?
Well, you can, but it requires a responsibility that most people don't want.
Is that a self-reflection?
Well, it's not just self-reflection, it's responsibility. Most people do not want to grow up. That is very easy. That is very easy to see. So most people do not want to grow up, and they will avoid it at all costs. So if they're avoiding it at all costs, and something happens to trigger a stress reaction emotionally, especially to a high degree, what do you think is going to happen? They've been avoiding growing up for such a long time. It doesn't mean that what they're feeling is unjust, what they're feeling is improper or inconsiderate or insensitive or wrong or anything. It does not mean that. It means that your body is experiencing what it's naturally supposed to experience according to the trigger. So, in doing so, I had to understand communications from a physiological level in order to understand how to convey these messages for communications.
Okay.
And the human organism itself develops empathy, meaning what's it feel like to be in the other person's shoes. We develop that from 1.5 to 3 years old. That's usually where we develop that, the ability to sort through our emotions and understand another. We start developing those skills at that time. That's traditionally where we do it, only because we're developing the hardwiring in our brain at the same time. We've eliminated that. Realistically, at 1.5 to 3 years old now, what does everyone have in their hand?
Tablet.
You have a tablet. So what does that mean? You have this living organism who is designed to communicate with other living organisms.
Through technology.
Now, we're not even developing our natural skill of communication amongst each other. I use ants as the example. They're not talking to each other, but you see all of them fall in line. There's a communication going on that we can't understand and we can't hear, so there's something going on. They're communicating amongst each other somehow. That's how we do it with each other. You ever look at somebody and know what they're about to say? You're getting secondary information beyond your normal senses. So you're able to accumulate information, deduct, and then have an approach. But this is the big issue. As horrific as all of these events are, and are getting worse, who's responsible for whether or not this thing is going to get better?
The people, the public.
Who remains?
The people, the public.
Okay. The people, the public, what are they made of?
Individuals.
Individual what?
People.
What did we just talk about?
Oh, well.
Humans.
Yeah.
Okay, humans, still people.
They got different emotions, different processes, different pathways.
No, they don't.
Oh, it's this.
No, they don't. Human. I didn't say African American or black. I didn't say Puerto Rican Italian. I didn't say white guy. Human. We are fundamentally designed the same way. Did any of us at this table design it? No. So, in doing so, there's a fundamental format that we all share. Central nervous system, fight or flight. Somebody figured out a long time ago how to trigger that in order to get people to do what they want. You're dealing with psychological warfare.
Damn.
So this is what you have to understand. As horrific as all of these events are, maybe will get worse if people can't compose themselves. It is a direct result of lack of control. And that's the hard part. People who are emotionally charged do not feel the need to be rational at the moment of the charge, because they're the individual who's actually feeling the sensation. So it's logical for them. The people on the outside who don't feel it are only seeing the product of that entire little process going on inside of them. So we're left not understanding the outburst because we didn't see the series of events leading into it.
Like, I've heard of so many people say, over the course of a couple of weeks, why are they burning down, stores? Why are they, rioting? Why are they looting? And I understand it, because I'm looking at this from the inside looking out, as I'm them, an empathetic kind of figure. I'm like, this is a reaction of frustration of seeing this happen over and over and over again without the change happening over time. We have people going in people's houses. Breonna Taylor gets shot in her own crib. That's people chasing people down the street and shooting him. Ahmaud Arbery. We have, George Floyd's killing. It was just one after another.
You're being overwhelmed on purpose.
Yeah, and if you think it's on purpose, do you think that there's an agenda behind it?
Oh, yeah.
And what is the agenda? And how do we circumvent that agenda?
Well, this is the problem. You have to grow up. That's a big issue for a lot of people when they're emotionally charged. They don't feel the need to think rationally nor logically because they're the one currently feeling what they are feeling. So depending on the level of the charge, they're going to want to express it. How they express it is dependent on the level of composure. The level of composure comes with the level of maturity that the person has.
But does emotion have use in this atmosphere? Because I feel like it does.
Only if it's composed.
Only if it's composed. I think, so empirically, like Brandon was saying, people haven't paid attention to the ceilings, but we've been living in it. We've all been kind of oppressed in a way. But when you talk about agendas and mass corruption or disruption, this goes back, man,
time.
long, and there has been literally a removal of moral ethics from law, right? So early Greek philosophers came up with natural right, natural law, which is what we kind of all grew, which is what the bastardization of Martin Luther King's approach was of those of Greek philosophers. Civil rights is only natural rights. The word civil was changed, and that's how we got into the division of, because it's human rights, right? We have the right to live. Anybody who takes away that right to live is going against natural law. That was removed. There's no right or wrong. There has been a strict science implemented to where that has been I don't even know if it's the main, I don't even know if it's called the main ingredient, because I think it's just, it is what grew. What was put into the ground is what grew.
I think it holds up the structure of society that, we can talk about capitalism if you want to talk about it, but it definitely suits a certain type of system where you have people who almost are conditioned to be treated by and to obey authority. So when it comes down to that, almost the authority is the authority of themselves. They cannot do no wrong. And that's how, from the outside looking in, it looks as if, regardless of them, taking your human right away, or going against natural law, there is no justice. So then you get the response of people emotionally overcharged who may not even have the faculties to emotionally be composed and then take a logical action.
They have the faculties, they don't want to.
I can't say that. I can't say that.
Because that boils down to the individual self-composure. Who's responsible for emotional management?
It's themselves, but there's people who have higher capabilities
It does not matter.
of emotional.
This is the responsibility of growing up. This is a conditioned issue. The society has been conditioned to accept certain things as is, which are not necessarily true. So there's a lot of people behaving according to what everyone else accepts, this is where you have to be careful, because people behave out of fear more often than not. It's a motivating force for a lot of people, especially people who want control or power. They're feeling an insecurity. What do they need power for? Huh? They're trying to get something done, or they're trying to be deceptive. Any real person is not seeking power. Any real person is genuinely a good-natured individual, a decent individual. Anybody who's trying to avoid this instilled fear that they have in themselves, they're compensating for something. So they have to overcompensate and project out in the real world to hide whatever the insecurity is. This is what I was talking about. You're going into human psychology. There have been people way smarter than us who've been planning things for an extremely long time, and they're looking for the right opportunities to trigger the mass reactions.
But when you talk about people not wanting to grow up, I want to throw in there the education system, because
That's a part of it.
this is, you saying it's on the individual, but some individuals have not been taught emotionally to even have
I think that's the
on a day-to-day basis.
That's the generational impact.
And everybody has different, neighborhoods and communities they grow up in. But some people have not been taught to compose their emotions. So when I say that, when you say that, it's because you can't just chalk it up to just they don't want to grow up. They haven't been able to experience or be taught how to manage.
This is the illusion that you're falling into. Just because they haven't been taught does not mean they're incapable of learning.
Absolutely.
All right then, so you don't make an excuse for them. That's the issue. People who are feeling what they are feeling feel that they are justified to feel how they are, and then want to express it in an uncomposed manner. Just because George Floyd was killed does not mean that all law enforcement are murderers. This is the thing you just said earlier. You feel for them, but you saying that these other people don't represent me, they're not me, those are humans just like you.
And
under the same
absolutely.
conditions, you have the tendencies to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
That's where a lot of people make the mistake, because another human being, you have unchecked power. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to keep going until they're stopped. And it's going to manifest even worse than what it initially began as. This is no different than what you deal with children. An uncomposed child or an untrainable child is an unemployable adult. We've groomed generations of people to accept victimization. That is not the case. There are terrible things that have always occurred to a variety of different people at all times. What is going on right now is we are now seeing them much more clearly in larger groups of people than ever before. These are things which have always existed. The black community has known that very clearly. So now, this outrage that's going on is just it's being triggered by the issue of the callous murder. Now that callous murder touched upon the primal guttural instinct, triggered the emotional response, and yet you have generations of people who say, this has happened to us, this is what we've experienced. There's no one saying that they're completely inappropriate or unjustified for feeling how they're feeling, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to destroy your own community because you can't control yourself? They killed David Dorn in Minneapolis. He was protecting his friend's pawn shop. He was the chief of police for his town, for his city. He was an honorable man. He was a black man, killed by another black individual who was trying to rob his friend's pawn shop. So where's the justification for that man?
Yeah.
That individual decided to feel however he was feeling and decided to take it out.
Yeah, I acted to tap on that and not to compound, but just a recent situation. 19-year-old woman, woman activist, Black Lives Matter, Black trend, like LGBTQ2, like
Very active, a very big supporter.
Dismembered by her family, out on the street, living in the church or things of that nature. Voiced
her sexual assault on Twitter. 2 days later, she was murdered by a black man. And like you say, the distractions, right? Like, you know, like our anger is here one way, and then all of a sudden black trans are getting murdered. So now it's like, you know, Black lives can't matter until all Black lives matter because a black trans person is a black. So we're divided there. And then now what's being used, like you were saying, where we want justice and we want to see people prosecuted that don't look like us, because a lot of our crimes performed against ourselves are prosecuted. This person that murdered this young lady, caught, apprehended, guarantee you he'll get charged.
Yeah. And
right, and then I think and that goes back to Brandon, and I know that's happening to you too, Chidi, where psychologically, man, that's gotta fuck with you.
Yes.
Like that
It's
has to
and we can talk about like how we're programmed and we're being triggered, you know, and we're getting a flight response for a reason. But at the end of the day, we can't put a punctuation on that and say it's because
Why not?
because you don't want to grow up.
Why not?
Because human beings are humans. It doesn't end there.
humans grow though, right?
Humans grow. Exactly. Humans grow. So
Humans must mature.